Let's jump right in, because today we are unpacking something absolutely massive. We're looking at the anatomy of the brand new and highly controversial US-Iran peace agreement. We're starting right in the deep end here. Immediate and permanent termination of military operations. Just think about that. This dramatic announcement came from mediator Pakistan, and it signals a sudden, literal screeching halt to over 100 days of incredibly intense conflict in the Middle East. Section 1. The Breakthrough Peace Deal. Let's trace how this unexpected pause actually came together over what was a totally chaotic weekend. Okay, so the timeline here moved at lightning speed. War breaks out in late February, right? Tensions just keep ramping up until June 14th when Israeli strikes hit Beirut. Then, literally hours after that massive escalation in Lebanon, frantic diplomacy by Qatar and Pakistan somehow manages to pull both the US and Iran back from the brink. They announced the deal on Sunday, setting up a Friday signing in Switzerland. Talk about a whirlwind. Moving to Section 2, inside the 14-point agreement. Now that we know how fast this happened, let's look at the actual framework of this reported draft. The core mechanics of this deal basically anchor on 4 major structural shifts to cool the whole region down. First, an immediate end to military ops on all fronts. Second, the US has to lift its naval blockade around Iran within 30 days. Third, and this is huge, reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And finally, setting a strict 60-day clock to negotiate a final comprehensive nuclear agreement. But here is the real sticking point. $24 billion. That is the reported amount of frozen Iranian assets that are supposed to be released. And man, almost instantly, this massive number became the most fiercely contested part of the entire agreement. Everyone is arguing over exactly when and how this cash actually gets unfrozen. All right, Section 3, the Lebanon flashpoint. Because, as we know, a deal on paper is one thing, but the reality on the ground is a whole different beast. The really tricky part is how deeply intertwined this US-Iran ceasefire is with the parallel conflict between Israel and Hezbollah. Honestly, that June 14th Israeli bombing in Beirut almost completely blew up this entire delicate diplomatic process. It just goes to show that regional stability is definitely not a two-player game. And this right here completely redefines the rules of engagement. Iran is signaling a new strategic doctrine where an attack on their regional proxy network, like Hezbollah, is now treated as a direct attack on Iranian soil. This is a total game changer. It transforms local battlefields into direct tripwires for a much wider regional war. Section 4. 2 conflicting narratives. As you'd expect with a geopolitical earthquake like this, the domestic messaging is incredibly polarized. Let's neutrally examine how both sides are spinning this. It's kind of fascinating. The US and Iran are telling their citizens completely opposite stories about who conceded what. Washington claims the nuclear program is totally dismantled, no money is moving up front, and Hormuz is basically toll-free. Meanwhile, Tehran is telling its people that nuclear enrichment is facing zero disruption, the $24 billion is released immediately, and Hormuz remains under Iranian sovereignty. Obviously, both of those things cannot be true at the same time.
To reassure the folks back home, the U.S. administration is hammering hard on complete nuclear disarmament. You've got Vice President J.D. Vance framing this as a rock-solid victory, stating they can say with confidence that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon.
But flip over to Tehran, and the reaction is fierce. Hardline lawmaker Mahmoud Nabavian perfectly captures this massive domestic backlash, basically accusing the negotiators of crossing supreme red lines. To the hardliners, any compromise with the US is considered a pure loss. No mincing words there at all. Section 5. Global Economic Shockwaves. Let's pivot to how geopolitics directly impacts your wallet, looking at the immediate economic ripple effect this news sent across the globe. The relief from the international markets was absolutely instantaneous. Global oil prices took a sharp dive the second traders priced in the return of oil flows. Brent crude dropped over 4%, and WTI crude fell nearly 5% the very moment the ceasefire hit the wire. So, why the violent market reaction? It all comes down to one crucial choke point. A full 20%, 1/5 of the entire world's oil and liquefied natural gas supply, relies entirely on getting through the unblocked Strait of Hormuz. If that strait closes, the global economy literally suffocates. Reopening it is a massive, massive economic relief valve. Section 6. A fragile 60-day window. Finally, let's wrap up by looking at how all this builds toward a highly precarious future.
Both of these nations are stepping onto a seriously fragile tightrope mapped out over the next 2 months. First, you've got the electronic signing in Switzerland. Second, lifting those naval blockades and reopening Hormuz within 30 days. And third, an intense 60-day negotiation window to somehow iron out all those huge contradictions we just talked about, all while trying to keep the region from sliding right back into war.
Because let's be real, the underlying tension here is far from resolved. You've got US President Trump threatening an ultimate alternative if talks fail. And on the flip side, Iranian hardliners are literally calling this just a tactical pause to rebuild before a wider war. The stakes couldn't possibly be higher. So, as we watch these next 60 days unfold, I want to leave you with this pivotal question to chew on. Are we actually witnessing the dawn of a new, peaceful Middle East? Or is this whole thing just a 60-day pause before the final battle? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and we will see you next time.